Welcome to Podtendo, a Nintendo podcast, where they analyze, reminisce, and replay the glory of old Nintendo games.
Your Olympic hero has arrived. It's true. Hey, think dyke, kid. You people have to be honored to have a man of intensity, integrity, and intelligence among you. Yes, I'd like a room, please.
Sorry, no vacancy.
Oh, that's okay. I'll take theirs. Here come my fans.
Prepare to lay the SmackDown in the all-new Hell in a Cell or in a high-flying ladder match. WWF SmackDown 2 Know Your Role for the PlayStation game console. You think you got what it takes, jabroni?
I love this place.
Rated T for teen.
Hey guys, welcome to the Podtendo podcast, where we analyze, reminisce, and replay the glory of old Nintendo games. And I guess today, PlayStation games, but not always, but a lot of the time PlayStation games. So many PlayStation games, so many. I am your co-host, Mick, and I'm joined in every episode with my lovely and talented co-host,
Tyson.
How's it going?
Good. How's things with you?
Oh, can't complain. Never, ever, ever complain. Ever. Yeah, good times.
Good.
Yeah, sweet. Are you excited for today?
Yeah, it's a fun one. I think we kind of are doing something a little out of left field, but I think it's fun. 'Tis the season for wrestling, I suppose. So.
Yes, when we planned this, I think we're coming out like mid-March. And I was like, oh yeah, man, WrestleMania is in April, end of March. No, it's like end of April or something. It's like April 20th. So we're only off by a month, but it's coming. But guess what, guys? That's okay. WrestleMania is like a month away. The road to WrestleMania is in full swing. And today we bring you Podtendo's Wrestling Mania.
Something like that. Yes.
Something like that. So we're going to look at two acclaimed kind of end of an era wrestling games today with WWF No Mercy for the N64 and WWE SmackDown Know Your Role. Or SmackDown 2, Know Your Role, for the PlayStation 1. In some way, shape, or form, we are going to butcher our way through these games that butchered their ways through my eyeballs the last week or two when I played them. And I was like, what are you? Smeared face?
Yeah, or like it's clearly just like a rectangle that they slapped us. A very pixelated texture that looks like somebody's face sort of gone onto it.
Yep. Oh, yeah, it's
Good
there.
times.
That's what we're doing today, guys. So, if your first show, welcome. We might talk a little wrestling at the end. I don't know. I might throw some curveballs at Tyson. We'll see what happens. Went a little rogue. Tried some new stuff. We'll see what happens. 2 games. Fun stuff. We'll start off with, I think, just chronological order. We'll go by release date, which technically would make the second game first, but we'll start with the first game because the second game has a title, and I don't know. We'll figure what's going on. We'll start with WWE No Mercy for the N64. It was developed by Asmik Ace Entertainment, Aki Corp. Sales had 1.19 million copies sold. The release date was December 15th, 2000. How long to beat has this game at 47 hours of content? Huh.
What a random number. I feel like wrestling games are kind of like infinite content because you can just keep playing.
Yeah, it's like a sports game. Like, how long does it take you to beat Madden? A while, because I think it's like 25-year career. You can play the player. You can play in every position as a player. You can play as a GM. You can play as a coach.
Do a season, dynasty, make some drafts.
Yeah. So it's just kind of one of those things. Infinite until the next copy comes out. So really, you have about a year. Has about a year worth of content on eBay. Copy of this game can go for $60 to over $200 for an inboxed copy. While I was doing some research last night, I actually found out that the original release, and I don't think I mentioned anywhere, the original release of this game was had a glitch. So if you bought for some reason the first wave of this game's onto shelves, your game would just randomly reset. So it had that fun glitch, the random reset where you just kind of playing, you got all your characters, Edge is going for the title, at Vengeance next month, and then all of a sudden you log in and nothing, back to square one.
Oh, the Baldur's Gate 3 feature.
Yep.
That's cool. That's a cool feature.
Oh, it's sweet.
I love that. I love that feature.
Yep, just that hard reset. And you're like, So there are some games potentially, if you were ever a collector and you wanted to look at some old games, No Mercy. I forget what, there's a call code you can find like on the actual cartridge. And if for some reason you find a -1, I believe that's like the edited, so it's a fixed copy. So And you actually had to, the only way to obtain that was you had to send in a spoiled copy of the game back to the Aki group, the Entertainment Aki Core, and they would send you this fixed copy. So just something as a collector. If you're ever out in the world looking at eBay listings and you notice like the -1, maybe you could look up the actual code. There's a chance you could get like a game that's worth hundreds of dollars for $60, right? Depending if the seller knows what they have or not. So there you go. Some insider trading tips.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
The age before the internet just fixed patching games,
Yeah.
but still modern games still get this wrong from time to time. So,
Yeah.
still bitter about my save being deleted.
It's fine. Cyberpunk finally became good. Where to play?
Did it?
Well, some
People kept saying that, and then I played it, and I glitched through walls, and it was a horrible mess.
No,
of
but it
glitches.
got better. I didn't say it was perfect. It just got better.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? You can sure shine a turd, I guess, and it still makes it a turd. So.
Yeah, it's nice shiny turd. Where to play? So you need one of the original original N64 original cartridge. Oh man, I must have said original 17 times there. That was great. Specifically, if you find the -1s, then your save data will never ever get deleted. I mean, at that point, some of the prices, you just buy yourself an EverDrive, put some ROMs on it, be fine. Or an emulator. There you go. Development details of this fun game. So this game was first announced in early 2000. There was a playable demo at E3 that saw an ad of a Game Boy game with a transfer pack to add content to the experience. However, this was eventually scrapped. Early release cartridges would erase all your data. This led to that massive recall that I had mentioned earlier. It was the last game developed by Asmik, Ace, and Aki for the N64. They would later go on to work on the Def Jam games. So,
sick.
Yeah, Def Jam, Fight for New York. Badass game.
It's a great game. Good soundtrack. Great roster. Good game.
Yeah, and you're like, cool, look, I can play as Fight Snoop Dogg.
Yeah, it's DMX.
I think, yeah. No, you had to make a created character, and I think to play through the story. Maybe.
Yes,
Maybe.
but I feel like there was a versus game. I feel like we were all like, we messed around with it for sure.
Yeah,
because that was a popular game when it came out.
Yeah,
was it PlayStation 2? Yeah,
I think so.
PlayStation 2.
Yeah. Those would be like, I go back. I remember playing Def Jam 2, and it was sweet. And like fighting like Busta Rhymes in this like burning building at the end. Whatever. Mark Bozon, also writing for IGN, commented that No Mercy era brought the first truly deep wrestling experience to many gamers, and that there's truly no better American wrestling game in history, as No Mercy is still regarded as one of the best balanced and true-to-life fighters in the business. Despite its age and the release of the newer wrestling titles, No Mercy retains a strong cult following of players who favor it over more recent wrestling games.
I could understand that. Like, I've played some of the newer ones, like the 2K games, and it's like, oh my goodness, these are a train wreck.
Yeah.
So, and it's like, it's a wrestling game. How hard why are you making this so difficult? They just kind of like, I don't know, they nailed the controls in this one, and yeah, how do you just keep ruining it when you already had somebody do it correctly? It's like games that still can't get platforming done when Mario 64 nailed it. It's like, come on, copy and paste.
Just copy them. Yeah, exactly. No, these guys, I think specifically they worked on, it was like a Japanese wrestling game. Not Fire Pro Wrestling. Shoot, I should have wrote it down. Anyways, the guys that worked on this, essentially the system that they kind of worked on was the New Japan Wrestling system or something like that. Pretty popular series in Japan. And the other versions, so if you're familiar with, say, like WWF Attitude for the N64, I think that's the game we had. Warzone or something like that. They're bad, they're clunky, they're glitchy, they're slow moving. They have input controls of, say, like left right B is like your power bomb. This control setting, and that's kind of the section where the controls, they're more relatively easy to control. There's strike buttons, you can grapple, as well as you press a directional button with a grapple, it just does a different grapple move. So instead of making people from that old arcade mentality of like fighters, where you have to like remember button combinations and like special setups, every player kind of just plays the same. You pick up a guy, left is a power move, right is a submission, up is a power bomb. And they're just different variations of those moves that kind of correspond with each character to kind of give them more of that realistic. When you have dealt enough damage in a match, you can get into a special mode. And using the special stick, you can deal your finishing move to your opponent, potentially win the match.
Yeah. It's pretty cool. Like, I mean, they obviously, like I said, simple, approachable. And, like, I mean, I wish more fighting games kind of had this, like, copy and paste system where, like, sure, just be like like this person's left like or power move is going to be different than another person's power move, but you still like know what button combination to do the thing that you're trying to do. So
yeah,
kind of wish more games would just stop thinking outside the box on that one.
Yeah, and just like simplify too, right? I don't know. I find that with sports games. Like, sports games were very simple, right? And then they kept making all these motion controls and some of the joystick things. I find that with hockey. Anytime I go to play hockey and I have to like shoot with the stick, and my guy I press forward to shoot, and the guy like has the weakest wrist shot in the world, and I'm like, well, I actually have to put it to the side and then flick it up quickly. And I was like, how do you differentiate this control? Like, I'm an input output. I'm a one kind of function guy. I don't like this whole analog. Well, there's different variations, and if you press here and I don't know, the pressure sensitive stuff, I'm like, I don't know if this is the best gaming ever. Just give me simple, this does that, end of story.
Yeah, I'm a big proponent to whenever it comes to sports games, I just go into controls and I choose buttons.
Yeah.
Because I hate the sticks, because even though you're like, I'm clearly doing the thing, oh no, it's not working randomly because maybe it's at a slight angle or some BS. And
exactly.
Like, this is horrible. So I just, as soon as I can in any game, I just like get rid of the stick, press buttons. Like, I'm sure it's like, I know there's a lot of people who prefer the stick or and when you get good at it or whatever, it's like, yeah, no, just give me a good old fashioned reliable button. So when I press the button, it for sure does the thing that I'm asking it to do.
And once you get used to get used to the speed of the game, how it controls, how players move, you kind of get used to the other elements. Sure, you can like introduce a new control scheme, right, and kind of help refine your skills and kind of compete. But again, if you're just playing things casually and for fun, why are you killing yourselves, right? The controls we're seeing in this game are just the culmination of essentially what was Aki's wrestling games, and it's kind of the best version of the early generations, right? So out of the arcade, out of the early home consoles, this kind of essentially became the gold standard, right? It's seen more in the SmackDown games going forward, where there is just one button grapple, right? But even those games, as you go on, one of the years, they had like a power move where you could like put your wrestler, you'd pick him up, and then depending on like how you moved the stick, you could like pretend to do squats with him or something. You could like lift him up and body press him. You could like spin around in circles, right, depending on the different inputs from the stick. And it just slowed the game down and made it worse. And there's no way of removing it. So if the opponent grabs you and just like does squats for 2 minutes, you're just wasting your time, right? So it's kind of a bit more of a rudimentary system. However, this is kind of the apex of that early, or kind of coming out of the arcade. This is like the apex of home controls, essentially, is what you're getting in this game. So picking it up, pretty easy to play, right? I don't think that's maybe, do I get into that at any point? No, we can talk about that now. Controls. I think at this point, these podcasts essentially are mostly control-based, right? Because there isn't a lot of content in these games. So unfortunately, we have to stay in this section a little bit longer today. They're just easier to pick up and play. Played with a friend a couple years ago. After, I don't know, 1 or 2 matches, maybe 20, 25 minutes, we kind of had the controls down packed. Yeah, you maybe have to look up how to use your finishing move. Maybe, need to know to press down grapple as your pin button when your guy's knocked out. But other than that, relatively easily to kind of figure out, and it's fun, right? So playing around a couple matches isn't the end of the world, right? You get more familiar with the setup. Anything else with the controls you would like to discuss?
Nah. I think you kind of meant like hit the nail on the head. Like, it's fun to be simple, have simple controls where like even if you and a friend sit down and start playing this game, like you can just pick it up and have a good time.
Cool.
Like, and that's what games should be about. Games should be about having fun and being able to pick it up and put it down and relatively easy. I find that a lot of like modern games, like even if you don't pay attention, and you, let's say you don't play a game for a couple years or whatever, here's a bunch of new random mechanics to keep the game quote unquote fresh. And it just like, it sometimes takes away from it, where I feel like this game nailed the template, which is why I feel like a lot of games around this time just kind of ripped off what they did. And it was a good call, and we've gotten away from that, and that's why the modern variations frickin' suck. So
yeah, I saw that. I was doing this research, right? I guess I come out and just say I used to love wrestling. So essentially around this era, right? So this SmackDown 2, No Mercy, I was getting into wrestling. I loved wrestling. Wrestling became my life. It was like the only thing I'd watch on TV. Followed it all the time for years, right? Just kind of became my obsession, right? And this was kind of my first entry point, right? So I kind of avoided most of the content before this, dabbled on one or two games, right? And then going forward, some of the SmackDown versus Raw games, SmackDown games on the PS2 get a little bit better, and I think they culminate in about like 14 or something like that. I forget which one, 14, 13 of the 2K games is kind of the apex, right? It's just, it's the most characters, it's the most storyline, it's the most, at that point you could upload content on the internet, and guys would have hours and hours and hours and years of storylines you could download and play through, and they were all customizable, and it was just super immersive. And then they made a jump into the PS4, and it was just the washed down, boringest, worst mechanics across the board, right? Not a lot of good things been reported, and that was a decade. So probably for the last decade, wrestling games have been kind of just terrible, and doing the boring sports were the same thing all the time, right? So you see ups and downs, and this is definitely one of the peaks, right? One of the peaks of the wrestling business, wrestling video game industry, at least, in terms of quality of games. So it's kind of one of those highlighted points, hence why we're picking this point in history to kind of go back and reflect upon. So rather than kind of wasting all our time in, oh god, do you think WWE wrestling for the Super Nintendo is worth talking about? I don't think it is.
Yeah, I was gonna say, do they even exist? I wasn't aware of them. These ones are kind of the ones we know.
They have one that has like Ultimate Warrior and Undertaker, and I liked Undertaker because there was like a gong. It was like boom, and he kind of was scary looking. But when I rented the game when I was like 4, I remember all I could do is go and stand on the turnbuckle, because the other guy couldn't hurt me, and I would just stand there and look at him, and that was like my experience with it. So few and far between, nothing great, nothing special, as opposed to this one. This one does kind of come off as at least a bit more of a more intuitive experience, right? And something you could actually sit down and play for a while. What else could you do? There are 61 WWE superstars, and each of them have 4 different outfits. So that is a lot of variety of characters. You can select an exhibition match, which could be single matches, tag team matches, 4-way matches, Royal Rumbles. Although the Royal Rumble, you can only ever have 4 people. And once someone's eliminated, then the next person comes in. So it's not like this big, giant, epic 30-man match yet. Anyways, King of the Ring. You could create a pay-per-view. You can play through survival mode, so where basically you just like fight wrestlers in a Royal Rumble, in an attempt to eliminate the most players. There's a leaderboard that you can kind of try and follow. If a new character, an unlockable character, shows up in this Royal Rumble match and you eliminate them, you unlock that character. There's a story mode where wrestlers can compete for championships. You can follow storylines, and you do collect money from playing these games. So you can purchase new arenas, new outfits, and even new wrestlers.
Yeah. I mean, this is where like the money is for this game. Like, it's all the different modes and varieties. Because if you were just to play this game, or like let's say a traditional fighting game, where it's like, here's maybe a ladder that you're just trying to get your way to the top, and then here's just individual matches. I like that every game has kind of like a theme. Like it's cool to do like Royal Rumble's a classic. Like, everybody loves the Royal Rumble. It's kind of sad that's like it was limited and only could have 4 at one point, but that would eventually progress in later things. Like, obviously there's restrictions and just hardware. So, but I appreciate everything that they did. They try to cram as much entertainment and content into this game to make it kind of so when you played it with friends, you had lots of stuff to do.
Well, and it was a weird template too of like a wrestling game that, yeah, it isn't just about the exhibition match. It's not just about the actual match. It's not about the wrestling. It's about everything else, right? It's, you can make a character, you can customize them, you can build a pay-per-view, you can build storylines for your characters, you can kind of be a booker, essentially, right? So the booker in a wrestling show, anyone that's unfamiliar, uninitiated, is kind of the guy that decides the outcomes of the matches, right? If you're the booker of the show, you put together the matches, you figure out so you're kind of the promoter slash result guy, right? But you can kind of, it's a booker simulator. You can make your own stories. You can follow along. You can follow the preset storylines. You can have your characters try and win championships, right? Just a little bit more involved. There is a pretty complicated behind the scenes. I don't know what's in the background, there's a bunch of character interactions. So you can, when you build a character, you can say, like, China is his best friend. Well, China's more prompted to help you out in story mode, more likely to come out and help you in matches, more likely to be your tag team partner, right? If you're friends with them. And there's a pretty intricate character interaction system that goes on behind. Now, you can't interact. I don't think you can change those things with, like, you can't make Chris Jericho friends with Kurt Angle or something, right? Like, those are just some of the limitations of the system. That's all kind of preset, but it is kind of neat that it exists, and it kind of just helps keep things focused, right? And keep guys in certain areas, and it works. I don't know. It's just a weird system that they kind of integrated into the background of this that you would never know, right? Unless you kind of dove a little bit further into, but just the customization and the interactability that exists in this title, right, is, I don't know, I think it's kind of cool. I was like, I think there's pretty cool stuff in this game, right? So I can appreciate that. And yeah, as a kid, oh baby, if I would have loved wrestling at this time and you would have given me this, this is what I'm doing for the hours and hours. Could you imagine if one of these games I was given to me as a child and I, like, forced you to play with me all the time? Wouldn't that be awful, Tyson?
Yes. I think I think for the second game that we're playing today was, I remember falling a lot more in love with.
Yeah.
I don't remember the N64 ones much at all.
I guess we didn't have this one. We had Attitude, right? And I know, but, like, to beat that game even was still awful. Like, take a character and you have to beat 10 wrestlers to get the European title, and then you have to beat 15 guys to win the IC title, and then it's 20 guys to win the heavyweight championship belt, and all the matches had stupid stipulations, and it just wasn't much fun. This is a lot more interactive, and yeah, like Tyson alluded to, SmackDown, we were a SmackDown family, not a WWE No Mercy family, so we're a little bit less familiar. Really, I've played this game for maybe 2 hours of my life, and go from there. Speaking of first memories, why don't we get into that right now? So, Tyson, what are your first memories of No Mercy?
I remember this was the cartridge was black.
Yeah.
I remember renting this maybe at a Blockbuster or something. Maybe it's blue.
I think the black one is WrestleMania 2000, which quintessentially is the same game. It's the same engine. It's similar match types. It just doesn't have the amount of content and creatability that this game has. Hence why I picked this game over that game. But they're very close. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's about it. That's about as far as my memory goes. So
okay, solid. Yeah, for myself, I know I heard about it and how in depth it was and how immersive the game was and how it fully encapsulated the Attitude Era in video game form. Right, awesome, great. Personally, I'm more of a post this. I'm a 2001 wrestling fan, not so much the 2000s. I watched a couple events, but was never really into it. Didn't follow it weekly. Didn't really care, kind of thing. During a sleepover, someone had brought it once, but I also feel like maybe Tony Hawk or Tony Hawk 2 was there, and Tony Hawk just encapsulated all the teen boys a lot more than this wrestling game, right? It's like kick flips and grinding, and we're like, oh my gosh, this is awesome. Truth be told, the next game is kind of what made me fall in love with wrestling games, right? So I just kind of had already picked the PlayStation, couldn't go back to the N64 at that point. I did pull it out a couple years ago when I had a friend come and stay at my house, like my house that I'm in right now, so like 7 years ago type thing, 8 years, I don't know, 6 years ago. We did end up playing through a couple matches, and I think we played a Royal Rumble and played the entire thing. So obviously we played for a couple hours, so it was kind of fun, right? Played through a couple matches in preparation for this, but that's essentially my experience with this game, right? Nothing great like Tyson. We're kind of like, we'll do kind of a quick little review, and then we'll get into the game that maybe we could speak a little bit more to that we've had played in the past, and go from there. So Tyson, what is your favorite part of WWE No Mercy?
I think for me, my favorite part is all the different modes, like being able to it being more than just like an exhibition game or a game where it's just like just beat these people and climb up the ladder, like. The simple fact of like the Royal Rumble and just like you kind of do King was it King of the Ring or whatever. There's like guest referees. I just think that there was a lot of fun modes and everything. But I do really appreciate this roster. This roster just gives me nostalgic vibes because I was like a lot of these wrestlers were still. Were the reason we're like around during the peak of when we got into wrestling and we're like renting the pay-per-views and everything. So but I think my favorite part is all the different types of game modes. So
Sure. Yeah, just the extra content. Yeah, for myself, favorite part is the Is this the song? Is this one that has the song that says "Dick diggity dick, dick diggity dog"? I think that might be the SmackDown. And I was like listening to it and I was like, this is the dumbest song, but I was like, the hours I've spent with the dick diggity dog song. No, favorite part of this game. The amount of content has to be the fact that you could just dive into this game and spend, I don't know, hour, 2 hours playing around, looking at stuff, right? Not even playing the games. Just, what does a pay-per-view look like? I think I did that. I built a couple pay-per-views and I was like, neat, cool. Okay, here's all the wrestlers. Here's the limitations. You can do this. You can do that. And I think that's just one of the most noteworthy parts, right? So if you're a champion of this game and you liked it, that's definitely has to be. Could we pick a most notable part of this game?
For me, it's the roster.
Okay.
Like this roster was like it made me like remember people like Test and Grandmaster Sexay. It's like, oh man, just like. Seeing all these characters again, it was like, holy moly, like I guess they were around during this time, so it was just cool. Like, remember like Hardcore and Crash Holly and Perry Saturns of the world. They're just like these people that you're like I've forgotten about, but I vividly remember from my childhood. So for me, it's like the most notable part is like, let's go look at this old like roster and just like, wow, this is so cool. Like seeing the start of it all.
That's sick. The fact that you don't think about Perry Saturn every day. For some reason, I always thought Perry Saturn had like some relation to the Sega Saturn. And if you were like a fan, maybe you got one. So it was always kind of like, I was like, I could be into this guy, but like, where's my Sega? Where's my Sonic, bud? Huh? Perry?
Yeah.
Huh? Mr. Perry? Where's my Sega Saturn? Most notable parts. Is it the roster? I think it's the blue cartridge. Honestly, I think it's that blue cartridge, the way it stands out in my mind, the way that if I see a blue cartridge at N64, I'm like, oh, it's either The World Is Not Enough or it's WWE No Mercy, which are both awesome games, and I think anyone, if you found those, would be over the top. So I think just the part that stands out in my mind the most is that blue cartridge. As we say that, I'm going to Google this just to make sure I'm not being a complete, like, a-hole.
I think it's black, Mick.
No Mercy.
I'm 95% sure WWF No Mercy on the N64. Like, because WrestleMania and this one were both black.
We're both black. Yeah, I'm wrong. Huh. I'm not wrong that often, but it is definitely black. So, okay. Black. Yeah. Huh.
Well, I'm sure that there's a blue cartridge of one of these games. Maybe it was a WCW game.
No, I'm wrong. I'm just wrong. It's always black. Has been black. Huh. Well then. Black cartridge stands out. Tyson illuminated it. I didn't cross-check. I just sound like kind of a turd in the punch bowl. But yeah, black. There you go. Cool. Black cartridge. That's what stands out. You see that? You're like, that's either WWE 2000 or WrestleMania 2000 or WWF No Mercy. Both are pretty sweet.
And the blue one's WCW Backstage Assault. Yeah, so there was a blue one kicking around there, but there's a lot of wrestling games.
Yeah, so. There's so many wrestling games. Least favorite part? I just like And my criticism of this game, it's antiquated. It's hard to get into. There isn't tons of content. If you weren't playing this specifically for a podcast or playing it with a friend just to kind of try it out, and you had to play this game for some reason, I think you'd have a bad time. I don't think it'd be super enjoyable nowadays. It's just super antiquated. It's fun to go back and kind of see where we came from, right? And these are what kind of that era of games that are like, you need to know where we came from to kind of see where we got to, but you can kind of skip them for the most part. So I think that's just kind of my criticism is going back to them now. You kind of feel you're like, ugh. And like the graphics, not the graphics are everything, but the graphics are bad and they make you question things and you laugh and you're like, what did you do to this person?
Yeah, it's back from, like, there's very little pixels, and it's just kind of like textures slapped on pixels, or polygons, or whatever the heck they want to call them. It was just like, this is rough. Like, yeah, that's my, like, biggest criticism. It's like, it's just ugly.
Yeah.
It's just an ugly game to play. Like, it's not pretty.
No.
It's, if a game deserves to be, like, remastered and redone, it's like, I think that you could do a lot with these old games,
Sure.
but we apparently don't go that far. We like to remaster, like, no, we need to remake The Last of Us 2 again and make it slightly prettier.
In
See
4K.
these blades of grass, now they're separate. That was worth $80.
And final praise, I would say the amount of care and just that the next step. This did feel like one of those games that was kind of the next gen because of just the inclusion of sound, right? Every wrestler had their own individual soundtrack. They didn't just walk to the ring and stand there like they would in the past. They would dance, right? Too Cool, Scotty Too Hottie, Grandmaster Sexy. They danced to the ring. Triple H, Spits Water. It's kind of all a little bit more customizable in the fact that they gave us full arenas. They gave us the Titantron. They gave us entrances. It just adds a lot more to the experience, right? And kind of helps you feel like you're in a wrestling game, right? Adds to the experience. And I'm glad that they took their limitations and did the best they can with it, right? So that's my final praise. Do you have a final praise for this game before we move on?
Yeah, I think we kind of said, like, the simplified controls. Thank goodness these controls were just, like, approachable. They were interchangeable. Like, they had a good system. They just kind of swapped out what move they would do or whatever. And you're like, and that's perfect. Like, this is how games should be built for, like, fighting games or wrestling games. It just should be approachable, easy to understand.
Yeah.
Once I have a grasp of it, I should just be able to swap out any characters that I want. Like, in a golf game or like in hockey or like Madden, like, if you're playing as, like, the Kansas City Chiefs, you're not going to play. It doesn't play fundamentally different than every other game. So it makes it much more like a sports game where it's just like, pick up, you can play, you cannot play this game for years and you can still just, like, as soon as you, like, relearn it, you just have it for forever and you can swap it out. So it's like, I really appreciate that.
Cool.
So simplified controls, brilliant. Bring them back. I love it.
Yeah, nice. Sweet. Now, on to our second game in Podtendo's Wrestling Mania. We're going to look at SmackDown 2, Know Your Role. It was developed by Ukes THQ. It sold 1.1915 million copies. I don't know why it was such a specific number. It was released November 20th, 2000. How Long to Beat has this game at 42 hours. eBay copy of this game is only going to set you back $15 to $50. So there are no rare copies of this game. So that one you have on your shelf, you've had for your whole life, that has the busted front cover and the manual just hanging on for dear life to that disc, it's worth nothing.
Yeah, which is fine.
Yeah.
I think sometimes when, games have glitches or whatever, they kind of end up worth more. But this game has no glitches. It's perfection. It's perfection.
Oh, it's perfection. All right. So you need to play this game on an original disc or an emulator. I think I busted out my little cute PlayStation 2. I don't know if I've talked about this on this podcast before. It's like the smallest thing. They had these thin PS2s at some point that came out, and they were like the size of maybe a DVD case. They're super tiny, and the fact that they could pump out PS2 graphics and quality on them, I'm like, damn, that's impressive. Like, good job, PS2. You really were doing something. And you were a DVD player.
Yeah. Those PlayStation 2s, and it's shocking how light it is.
Oh, it's so
Like you pick it up and you're like,
compared
man,
to everything else. I'm like, what the hell is in these things? It's I don't know, probably unnecessary.
You can see why they sold so well, because obviously they were like reasonable to like manufacture, and they were lightweight to ship across seas. So it's like you could ship thousands and thousands of these bloody things for probably pennies.
Yeah, absolutely crazy. Development details of SmackDown 2. Know your role. Yuke's, the developer of SmackDown, had previously created the Tukon Rutsuzen series of wrestling games in Japan for New Japan Wrestling. Despite this, the game engine used in SmackDown is not based on the contemporary Token Rutsuzen titles, but rather the Pro Wrestling. A title developed by Yuke's as part of the D3 publisher's Simple series and released several months in Japan beforehand. Haha, see? Aren't you glad you knew that?
Yes. Well, it's one of those things where you're like, why? That's just more work for them, to be honest. But it's fine.
Sure, cool. Controls of SmackDown 2. The controls here are a bit more, I called them arcade-like, but arcade-like in a sense that this game is super fast. WWF No Mercy, cool, awesome. They had control. You could move around the ring, but when you fell down, like, you had to watch your guy stand up. In this game, when your guy falls down, he just like rolls up. He's back to fighting, no problem. It's a bit more of a button masher, right? So in this game, you can also, when you control your guy, you can do strikes, you can do grapples, very similar. Pressing a directional button, a direction plus a grapple button does a certain type of grapple. Move around the ring, you can interact with things. In this game, you get something called finishing move. So when you deal enough damage, you don't go into special, but you actually store up something called a SmackDown, and you can store several of them. So I think up to upwards of 5, and these are like your finishing moves. And then simply by getting your opponent in the preferred positions, whether like laying down, face up, so you do like a rock bottom, or groggy facing you, so you do a choke slam. You can just basically spam your finishing moves again and again and again to beat your opponent into submission. So, and I believe they're called SmackDowns. So you lay the SmackDown on your opponent when you press L1. So pretty revolutionary in terms of just how the game is played and moves. And I think this game is just, it seems really fast in comparison to WWF No Mercy.
Yeah. Like, I mean, but I like that it's simplified enough where, like, you're not changing things, you're not memorizing button combinations. You're just, if you want to grab somebody, it's just like a directional circle. You want to like climb a turnbuckle or climb a ladder or something, it's like triangle. It's like, you can even grab weapons in this game, so you can beat up people with trash cans. Like, who doesn't love beating people up with trash cans back in the day? It made us all want to go grab an aluminum trash can and just hit somebody over the head with it, just to see, does this actually work?
Oh, I mean, yes. Cookie sheets. Go to the dollar store, let your kids get cookie sheets, those tinfoil things. I don't know who I did that with, but we definitely got a bunch of those like tinfoil sheets from the dollar store. And then a bunch of us boys just went in the yard and just like beat each other silly. And the sound you get from hitting someone with like a tinfoil baking sheet is phenomenal. It sounds like you destroyed their brains. You like ruptured them. You've made them like need to take some type of special little bus to school. It was good times. It was great. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely around those times where like they started introducing like, do not do this at home.
Don't try this at home. Jumping off your roof onto your friend through a table, your mom's folding table, is bad. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it's like this might end up bad for both of you.
Yeah, okay, that's fair. This one, this game features other controls. Anything else we need to do?
Not particularly.
Let's see.
I'm sure we'll swing back to it.
Yeah, as we're going. This game only features 50 superstars. So down from the 61 in the previous one. You can play through similar matches as No Mercy. The big additions here is there's an I Quit match where you beat a guy, you have to grab a microphone, and then you kind of have to like get him to say I quit. So it's kind of like a pin. I believe they had Hell in the Cell introduced in this one. The original SmackDown game just kind of had a cage. So it was just with a roof, and you could kind of like throw your guy out the side. This one I think actually expands the Hell in the Cell. So there's like an outside area. You can be in the ring, you can be outside, or you can like outside the ring, inside the cage, or you can be actually outside the ring, outside the cage, climb on top. A little bit bigger there. There was also a casket match here where you could pick up a casket, throw it at your opponent, throw them into the casket, and then just kick them a bunch until the ring closes. You could also play an infinite season mode where you just compete for titles, you fight rivals, and it's ongoing stories, and it just kind of goes again and again and again and again and again. And if you're Mick and you make Tyson play with you, you play through like 5 years of the same thing. Tyson's like, I hate this. I'm going away. Don't play this ever again. I hate you. There's also an elimination mode where you can kind of just infinitely eliminate characters over and over and over again. And I'm pretty certain that if you get to 100, it like stops and you like get to put your name down. And I did that multiple times. There's multiple characters. So I don't know what the reward was, but I did it because that was crazy. So good times.
Yeah, it was fun. I mean, I think this one even had co-op stories. So like it'd be a SmackDown, and then my character would have a match, and then Mick's character would have a match, and then we could even have like a tag team later on. So I think we even had like we had multiple characters that we were like making. I think we both made like giant Kane characters. We're just like, the bigger the better. They need to do all the damage.
Yeah. My mind's Tyson was just a Jason hockey mask with like a bunch of like flaming skull tattoos all over him, and just like,
I think so. Yeah.
Every choke slam move was your move.
Basically, if I could have chokeslam be my basic strike, it's just choke slamming people. Yeah. It was fun, and I think it was cool because like you made your own character, you slapped it together your own move set and everything, and to me, it was beautiful. Like this is. I wish we still had like co-op games that had these features where like you could have a character and I can have a character and you can play through this whole storyline together, and just like it's kind of never ending if you want to. It's like, man, they really had something special here, and I feel like a lot of modern games, like, you're just missing this stuff. Like, go back to the basics on this. Like, this is what people like would love to do. Like, imagine if this was like even online where you don't like me and you could have a whole storyline or whatever, and like we could build like to me it's like, man, this is a template for fun, and I just wish that more games did this. Like, this was, they nailed it. They nailed it. Like SmackDown 2, there's a reason why we fell in love with like wrestling, and it wasn't just because it was interesting and it's kind of like a soap opera with hitting people, but it was like the games were fun, and they were creative, and they were something that we could actually like, you can spend a lot of time with, and it just like you can make it as much fun or as like it not fun as you want. It was just like, it's beautiful. I loved it. So
yeah, I remember spending tons and tons and tons, and maybe we'll get into that in first memories of time with this game. And I'm just trying to think of like, is there anything in terms of controls? Not really. It is faster. I know I had a bit of a learning curve when I first picked up this game, especially from coming from playing WWE No Mercy in the last few years. Like I said, I mentioned a couple years I played it, playing through it before this experience. I started with that one, and it's just simple. It's slower moving, slower paced. Whereas this game, oh my gosh, you're flying around. Like the first game I was The Rock, and the Undertaker just destroyed me. Like I couldn't do a single move. Every time he would be punching me before I could punch him, he'd be up as soon as I dropped him. He'd be like rolling, running at me, doing clotheslines. The speed of this game was way more intense. I had to play through 3, 4, 5 matches before I could kind of get 2 consecutive wins, right? In the various times. I imagine the more time you spend with this game, you just kind of get used more to the speed, more to the controls, right? But yeah, super fast paced, go, and like Tyson said, just the interactive story mode, yeah, it's great, it's awesome. Could more games do that? Probably. Like, you think with sports titles specifically, if we could set up an online, especially like football, they must have that. They must have online leagues, right?
I think what the new college, the NCAA football games, they are actually doing this stuff.
Okay.
So everybody's kind of like steering, like, why would you play Madden when you can just play the NCAA games, which is just the better version apparently, and has more like, you can create your own team. You can't do that in Madden anymore apparently, where you could create your own like logo, and I can create a logo, or I could have a team, then you could have a team, we could be in the same division so we could play against each other, and like, it's like, to me, that's awesome. Yeah, like, that's the stuff that's like, it makes it like really interactive, and it makes it actually worth I don't know. To me, it makes it interesting.
Yeah.
It adds value. It adds replayability. It essentially, like, if you have we could do a whole fantasy football league in there, and we could just like imagine if you could just have like 10 or so different people running their own like teams, and then it's like, oh no, today I play our other friend, and then you play your other friend, and then 2 weeks time we match up. It's like, to me, like that's what these games should be about. That's what's like, it should be, have these features, and it should be interesting. And it started here. I swear, these people, if they didn't.
Yeah. Now, with that being said, someone who's going, oh, did you know that WWE 2K24 actually has that feature? If you guys weren't noobs and actually played a video game, cool, awesome. I didn't know that. I haven't played any of the new games. I'm like tempted. I'm very tempted to buy like a new wrestling game. I'm like, that could be fun. That would be a fun way to spend a couple hours. I haven't, but I'm tempted. I'm very, very tempted. First memories of this game. I first saw SmackDown and Tony Hawk on the PS1 when we went over to a friend's house to watch the Royal Rumble, actually, in 2000. We got 3D Doritos. It was a fun Sunday afternoon.
Classic.
Yeah, oh yeah. That was great. I was like, this is perfect. There were some older kids, too. So I was like, oh, the cool kids are, like, at this guy's house. And we're, like, watching this, like, wrestling pay-per-view. I don't know. It seemed like I was, like, getting introduced to this cool subculture. There's Tony Hawk's going on. Oh, baby. I didn't know at the time, but that was kind of my first entry into the world that I would just kind of fall in love with. I never really watched wrestling before. I think you were into it a little bit more. You tried to get me to watch it, and I was like, nah, dumb. It's not a cartoon. Don't interest me, bud. Not interested.
Yeah.
I only watch Recess and Pepper Ann. That's it. None of this Mankind versus Rock nonsense. Over the next year, I definitely started following it a little bit more. I believe we were invited back to the same guy's house to watch WrestleMania that year, right? We kind of followed along a little bit in television, and it wasn't until, I guess, Christmas of 2000 when I would have received a copy of SmackDown 2 Know Your Role for the PS1 and just fell in love. Couldn't get enough. I had to watch every wrestling, every Raw, every SmackDown, the pay-per-views I started getting. Would play this game nonstop for hours and years, and it was awesome. I think I made the story mode or the career mode repeat itself. The number of times I went to WrestleMania 2000 in that game. I'm like, that's weird. Because I feel like WrestleMania 2000 was last year and the year before, so it's weird that WrestleMania 2000 always happens in this world.
Its official title is WrestleMania 2000.
Well, I think when you get to WrestleMania at the end of the story, it's called WrestleMania 2. That's like the branding for it, and I'm like, that was last year though. Clearly the date it's 2004, and it's still WrestleMania 2000. I'm like, no, it's called something else. Make a new arena.
Yeah. Just call it WrestleMania. What are we doing here?
Yeah. So that's my kind of. So what are your first memories of this title?
Making our characters. Okay. I don't remember. I think you got this as a gift. I don't know if we had the first SmackDown, but I feel like SmackDown 2 was the game that we just put a lot of time into. And I remember sitting down and making my Jason character and choke slamming everybody. That was I remember that vividly, and just us chilling in the bedroom and just hunkered around that tiny ass TV and just oh no, now I got to sit here and make all my characters. And I think that was just I remember just sitting around and playing that and going through. I think we played the whole storyline together. So
I do have this one memory too of I must have first got the game, and I remember playing through it, and I had played it 10 hours in the first day, and I'm like, Tyson, come play with me, and I'd beat you a bunch of times, and you're like, you just would destroy you. And we were playing one match, and it was a ladder match, and you were Steve Blackman, and then just I don't know, out of nowhere, where I'm kicking your ass, I'm beating you down, and Dad was watching for some reason. He had stopped in to look at the TV, and you just randomly hit me with this karate kick and knocked my guy out. It's TKO, and you and Dad just heckled me like no one's business, and I was like I won 25 matches in a row. You're like, well, except for that one, bitch. I remember that.
So that one time I kicked your head off. Apparently, it was Steve Blackman.
Oh, and it was this one loss that it still affects me. That loss, I'm just that made me who I am today. That was one of the defining moments of my life, was when Steve Blackman TKO'd The Rock in that ladder match. I was like, what am I doing with my life? You got to get better, right? You can't just sit by your laurels. You got to get out there and train, Rock. You can't just fight Apollo Creed. Apparently, you gotta train. Yeah. So,
well, you can't try to try to face Steve Blackman. He'll kill you, man.
Exactly. In a ladder match, weapons. Oh, he gets like upgrades. Oh boy, that was like the only movie he did all day. Just karate kicked my head off. First memories. I did a review of this game. Kind of now that we shared that. What is your favorite part? So we're gonna say character creation, just kind of that sense of
100%.
Yeah, customization, belonging, getting to feel like you were a wrestler, right? This is when I debut as my Jason character. This is how it's going down. Perfect.
Yeah,
Okay.
It basically was like, you know what? It made us want to be wrestlers, and it was cool that it's like, it's instead of just like, oh, you make your character or whatever. It's like, no, there's an actual story. You can actually like have them. There's like going to be cutscenes where they're wandering around, or like the D-Generation X is like, will like try to jump you in the back or whatever, and then all of a sudden you're like in a back
brawl or whatever. Yeah, backstage brawl, sure.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. It's like, man, this was great. Like they just integrated it so well.
Certainly.
So it's like, and actually having like the co-op where like me and you could each have our characters in the same, like, oh, it's SmackDown. Oh, I got a match against whoever, and it was like this was awesome. Like this was so cool, and I remember that vividly. So yeah, for me, it's like it's got to be that character creation.
Solid. So like I'd mentioned before, in November of 1999, I'm going to say most memorable part here. So my most memorable part is prior to kind of me getting into wrestling. So November of 1999, there was a storyline where Stone Cold Steve Austin was hitting by a car at Survivor Series, was taken off TV for a little while. He didn't return until probably sometime in the 2000s. But my quick glimpse into wrestling was The Rock, was Triple H, was Mankind, was The Big Show, right? Those were kind of the big characters. They were the main characters. So getting to kind of relive some of Stone Cold's moments of him going after DX, right? Destroying the DX Express, crushing guys, running over stuff in monster cars. A lot of that was encapsulated in the story mode for this game. So I always felt like my introduction to kind of Stone Cold, getting to learn who this mythical great wrestling character was actually through this game. So anytime I think of Stone Cold Steve Austin, I think of his shitty pixelated version in his stupid little camo hat, controlling this crane and destroying the DX Express, and like Triple H in the ring being all upset with him. That's my most memorable part of SmackDown 2 Know Your Role.
Yeah, no, that's fair. And I like that story mode, man. That is my most memorable part. Is like there was actual, like, there was cutscenes, there was cool stories that was going on, and like there was like, when you played it enough, yeah, sure, some of it repeated or whatever, but it was like cool. It's because like they actually put effort into it. It felt like no game we've ever kind of played before, that there was like this living story that we could kind of experience and interject your own self into. And it's like, this is so fascinating. It was so neat, and like it had such a wicked roster, and that you're just like, it didn't matter who you were playing. You were always like, oh man, yeah, I'm gonna beat up on Scotty Too Hotty today. It's like, or whoever it was, or Rikishi. It's like it was cool. And I mean, I think that this game definitely like kickstarted our love of wrestling. Yeah, and it like had it going strong for a very long time until we both kind of fell off. But
yeah, I mean, just kind of I still watched wrestling quite a bit until when I was in university, and then post university, we went to a wrestling show and we bought like shirts, and the next day at work we like wrestled all day. So it never really goes away. And now
it just sits there.
Now I go watch wrestling with my friends' kids because they're now into wrestling. So it's all just cyclical. It's all good stuff. Least favorite part. So just kind of clump this together. It is old. It's arcadey. This game has some drawbacks. So as I alluded to in No Mercy, they have fully interactive entrances, right? Music starts. Scotty Duati comes out, dances to the ring. You're like, oh, cool, just like in the show. In this, it's just a video. They show the video of Scotty Duati, and he comes out in front of the video, and he like just arbitrarily dances and walks in front of the screen. The loading times in this game, absolutely atrocious. Going back and playing through this, horrific. That story mode that you talk about so fondly, did you know that every single SmackDown, Raw, pay-per-view, you have to go through the entire card? It just doesn't, like, you can't just say simulate. You say next match. And then they pull up these two pictures of like China and the cat. And there's these two little meters, and the stupid little song plays, and it's like, and like you see the meters drop until one of them drops, and you get declared a winner, and then it goes to the next screen. Oh, and guess what? Sometimes they just have random loading screens, and they show Christian walking backstage, and you're like, wow, Christian's here today. And then another loading screen, and then back to like the menu, and then you say to the next match, and then you skip it, and then the next one there's a loading menu, and then Christian's sitting there, and he's like, I wonder who my opponent's gonna be today, and it's the same song as when they showed Christian earlier, and then there's another loading screen, and they get back to it, and now you're at the next match, and then you have to watch the little bars drop, and we've only went through 2 matches, and there's 8 matches to go through, and you have to do this for every single show. It is so long, it is just so antiquated, it does not work today. It is one of the biggest drawbacks, and getting back into this game, it makes it hard playing through this game. I don't know if there's Let's Plays online, but you need to be like an HC Bailey level of like random encounter editing when you're making a video like this, because oh my gosh, there's just so much dead time and waiting in these early PlayStation games. Like loading screens are so painful. So that is definitely the biggest downside to try and get back into this game. Is I think it would just fry people's brains, especially with short attention span. Could you imagine waiting for something nowadays? No, your computer doesn't load right away. You're like resetting it, throwing it in the garbage, buying a new PC. You're like, no wait time, no lag. Nuh-uh, not happening. So,
yeah, no, that's the issues. It's like, man, that's why I feel like when we're going into playing more PlayStation games, we are gonna need a book.
Yeah,
just so we can multitask while things load up.
It's been a while since I got some Dostoevsky under the belt, so maybe bust out some of that,
Yeah.
Okay, sweet.
Yeah, read a little The Gambler.
Any criticism, negativity that you just wanted to throw out?
No, I think it's like, it's kind of ugly.
Yeah.
Like the graphics aren't perfect or whatever, but I was like, God damn, do I appreciate the effort. Like, I see the effort, and I'm forgiving for it, because I feel like a lot of games don't put in half this effort.
Well, you have to take it with glass. Like, this is the best you could do. Yeah, sure, the first Tomb Raider looks ugly, but at the time, it looked great, right? So you kind of have to have that. Yeah, sure, you have to have that appreciation. You're like, oh, that, even though his face is stretched out, it kind of looks like The Rock.
Yep, more or less.
Yeah.
And Steve Blackman still, Steve Blackman.
Oh yeah, he's the Chuck Norris of this world for sure. I want a final praise. So I have a final praise. I was thinking something. I don't know.
I'll go.
Yeah, sure.
Good roster.
Yeah.
Great storyline. It made this game is the perfect like companion piece to wrestling. Like, if you just watch like SmackDown or Raw in the early 2000s, you're just like, no, I want to bust out this SmackDown, and I'm gonna play a little bit of this. Or you could, if you were lucky and you had 2 TVs, maybe you could watch that while playing. Yeah. It's like, I feel like this game does its job. It markets wrestling really well, and it makes you want to like watch it and play it and go to shows.
Sure.
And get invested in these characters. So like it does everything it needs to do.
Okay.
So, and I'm very impressed with, well, minus the loading screens, how well it holds up.
Yeah, as I was gonna say, I was like, the one perk of this game is it moves quick, right? Matches don't last longer than a minute or 2. They're very clean. They're fast. If you know what you're doing, like under 30 seconds, you can basically defeat your opponent, right? Especially you're playing through, let's say, a pay-per-view, you make 8 matches. You got some loading screens, but with matches, like you're under 30 minutes to play through 8 matches and make a pay-per-view. And that sounds pretty fun. Like that sounds like a pretty fun little afternoon. You can make a bunch of different little guys. You can have guys win championships. You can have different matches. And it's just not going to waste your time, right? And I enjoy the brevity of it. So that'll be my praise. Current thoughts. Now that we've wrapped up both WWE No Mercy and WWE SmackDown 2 Know Your Role, what are your current thoughts?
Well, comparing these 2 games, it's like SmackDown 2 is like, I'm glad that we included this in here, because I feel like if it was just like No Mercy or like the N64 games, it wouldn't be as fun and as memorable. But it's like, man, they're fun. Okay. Like I love how the simplified controls. I love the characters that you can use. I think that it's neat to have this like cool storyline. I generally wish more fighting games were like this.
Yeah.
And I know like the new Street Fighter 6 or what the heck we're on now. I played a little bit of it, and I just kind of fell off because it's like, oh, you can create your own character, and you can do all these things,
Sure.
and you can go explore this world, and just like, it has no character, no personality to it. Whereas this actually has, like, it feels like, you know, you're in wrestling. You're living it, and I think it just has, it shows the fun of wrestling and being able to make your own characters. It's just like it works. This game is just like, when it comes to wrestling games, this is, I don't know, in my mind, where it's like, this is peak. This is so good. If I like, just redo this style of game and make it modern, as opposed to kind of clunky.
Oh, sure. Like one of those. Yeah, I mean, they do that with baseball, right? Like RBI Baseball gets released occasionally, and it's just old school RBI Baseball with modern rosters. And you're like, perfect. That's all I want. I want literally a 10-minute baseball game where I'm just throwing pitches left, right, or right down the middle for a fastball or a curveball. You know, like, just stupid. I don't need all these super advanced timing mechanics. I just want it simple, clean. And wrestling would be fun like this, right? Just clean, awesome. Here you go. Here's my Roman Reigns. Here comes John Cena. They fight quick. They throw some caskets at each other. Great. Awesome. A little more over the top. Yeah. Current thoughts. It's fine to see where we came from. But I do think that this game, ultimately, with the loading screens and the graphics, feels a little older, right? A little more modern titles. Some more of the SmackDowns, the SmackDown versus Raws on the PS2s, PS3s, are just a better, cleaner experience, right? Like, you can find a bit better of a wrestling experience that look a little nicer and a little more interactive and have some different storylines and whatnot, right? So it's good to come back to, but outside of more of like a Friday night with a pizza with a buddy, you're not going to find me playing these in my basement anytime soon.
No, and that's kind of the thing. It's like, it's hard to kind of go back, which is why it's like, I wish we had these like arcade style story, fun based wrestling games, as opposed to everything needs to be a super sim right now. And it's just like, I appreciate that, but games are supposed to be also fun and casual.
Cool.
Like, so
sweet. All right. Well, that is it, guys. That ends our show, ends our review. We're going to kind of jump into a Wayback Machine. We've got a cultural significance where we talk about some talking points at the end, and we're going to go from there. But we're going to do things a little differently today. I was feeling a little more inspired. Didn't feel like doing the exact formula. In fact, if you look at our notes, Tyson's probably like, Mick, you didn't write anything down for any of the reviews. You just talked about stuff that you thought of instead of reading. I know, I'm trying new stuff today.
Yeah,
it's pretty exciting.
That's all good. It's exciting.
Pretty exciting. So usually we jump into our patented Wayback Machine. We travel back to a specific date and we look at what was life like when this game came out. But I thought, you'd be a bit different than that. This game kind of spans two different eras in wrestling, two different experiences, especially in my life. WrestleMania 2000 between WrestleMania 7 X7. So let's go and look at those matches, those cards specifically that I know we both watched, we both were a part of it in our childhood, and talk about them quickly. So we're going to travel back to some date in April or March of 2000 to see WrestleMania 2000. The notable matches from this card included a triangle ladder match between Edge and Christian when they defeated the Dudley Boys and the Hardy Boys. We also had a 2 out of 3 falls match for the IC and Euro titles, where Benoit defeated Chris Jericho to win the IC title. Jericho then defeated Benoit to win the Euro title, and Kurt Angle lost both of his belts that night.
Classic.
Yep. But also the best way to put like a super hot rookie Kurt Angle who's got these double titles and like take the titles off of him, but still make him look strong, right? He didn't lose.
Yeah.
He didn't lose either title, right? So it kind of gives you a kind of a jumping off point. So I make all three of those characters, right? And I mean, of those 9 people we just talked about, are they not some of the greatest wrestlers ever, right? Between Edge and Christian, the Dudley Boys, Hardy Boys, Benoit, Jericho, Kurt Angle.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's like, this roster is deep.
Yeah.
Like when now, is this the infamous tables, ladders, and chairs? Oh my!
They had the first match at SummerSlam this year, and then TLC 2 was at WrestleMania X7.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So that's coming up.
Yeah. Well, this was just like their first foray, and this was them kind of like essentially redefining what ladder matches could be, right? Ever since the first one with Razor Ramon and Shawn Michaels, you kind of got a taste of it, but it was never perfected. And then these crazy fucking guys come off and they're jumping off of titles and they're hanging off of titles and they're spearing each other and like
Oh,
Yeah.
that's a great shot where I think it's Jeff Hardy's dangling and then he gets speared by Edge and it's like beautiful. It's like
yeah.
this is an art form.
Yeah, absolutely. And he like the way Edge pops up afterwards and you see him and he's like, holy, and like the look of shock on his face as he flops down and you're like, oh, these fucking guys, they're just so crazy. And the main event that year was a fatal four-way match. We saw Triple H defeating The Rock, Big Show, and Mick Foley for the WWF Championship.
Oh, this was a big one. I think this was Big Show is a heel at this point.
No, good guy. They all had
guy.
like a McMahon in their corner.
Oh,
Right, so
okay.
Stephanie was backing Triple H, and Vince was like, "Oh, The Rock's my guy," and I think Shane was with the Big Show,
Okay.
and maybe Linda took over Mick Foley. Well, maybe Big Show was a bad guy. Yeah, no, he was a bad guy.
Yeah. Because I remember he went through like they never really knew what to do with his character.
my God.
Like he's big, like Andre the Giant, but we kind of got to use him as a bad guy sometimes because we have so many baby faces on this one.
Okay, here we go. Big Show face heel turns. I want a number. How many times?
Or I wonder if like this is where he comes into the match as a baby face and becomes a heel and helps Triple H win by like beating up The Rock and McFoley or something.
All right.
And I wouldn't be surprised by that. Like
No, this was because the Royal Rumble, The Rock beat Big Show, and they both went over the rope at the same time, but The Rock's feet touched first, and Big Show was like, "Well, I won," and yeah, it became a thing. Mick Foley retired at the Royal Rumble as well, and then he came back, and this was his final match. It's a Big Show.
Oh, right.
Funny facts about the Big Show, and the reason you didn't know if he was good guy or bad guy, heel or face, as they call in the wrestling business, over the course of his career, between it's called 2000 and like 95, so 25 years, he had 37 to 40 face/heel turns. So
That's beautiful.
So a couple times a year, sometimes he would just be a good guy, and then he'd come out and he'd like punch a woman in the face, and you're like, "Oh God!" And he's like, "Now I'm bad." And you're like, "Oh my gosh!"
No, I'm a bad guy.
And like just
He never knew what to do with him.
yeah. And then you want to he's a bad guy, and he'd come out, and he'd like save the girl from getting punched in the face next week, and you're like, "Oh, he's a good guy, perfect, awesome." And then he like punches the hurricane in the face. You're like, "I knew it! Son of a So
Like, how dare you? How dare you hurt a hurricane?
okay. Next year, however, so we're going to move into April of 2001. We get WrestleMania X7, quoted potentially as the greatest WrestleMania of all time. I remember loving it as a kid. I'd watch it. We had a VHS. I recorded it. I watched it like again and again. I had some girls come over to my house once. I'm sure they were interested in me, and I was like, "Hey, you guys want to watch wrestling with me?" And I made these like two girls that came over watch wrestling, and I was like, "Well, probably not like the most sexy thing I could have done." But again, I was also like 12, so what are you going to do? Notable matches this year, we saw Kurt Angle defeat Chris Benoit. So look at that. He got that victory back from last year. Shane McMahon defeated Mr. McMahon, his dad. The Undertaker defeated Triple H. We saw TLC 2. So Edge and Christian defeated the Hardy Boys and the Dudley Boys. And the main event that year was Stone Cold defeated The Rock.
Yeah, okay. This is the comeback of Stone Cold.
Yes.
With his many knee braces.
Yep.
And I think this was like the Kurt Angle Chris Benoit match that I think even Dad still talks about from time to time. It's like, that was a hell of a match. And like, yeah, it sure was.
No, it's just two technical wrestlers, apex of their game, putting on, for like the third card in this match. And you're like, oh my God, that was like the best wrestling I've ever seen. Like those guys just went at it for 5 minutes. Like they just like full out sprinted with each other. Genius. Beautiful.
Yeah,
Although,
and it was a big back and forth battle.
Technically, we don't talk about Chris Benoit anymore, so I'm not sure who Kurt Angle wrestled. I saw some interview with like Kurt Angle saying he's like, that's the worst part of my career is all my best matches you can't talk about anymore. He's like, I know what Benoit did was terrible, and it's a tragedy.
The guy had horrible brain injuries. Like,
yeah,
yes, what he did was horrible, but at the same time, it's like, yeah, but he was like. Yeah. He was a shell of himself. He was not. Well, his brain was Swiss cheese.
And think of how many people he saved since then, right? Like that has led Christopher Nowitzki to do massive research and massive work with concussions, right? And saved numerous people from suffering horrible events. So, I mean, it's a tragedy. It's awful. It happened. But it's hard to not reflect back on how genius Chris Benoit was and how much of a brilliant performer and just how he brought out the best in these people. And like, you want to watch pound for pound some of the best wrestling you'll ever see, Go back and watch some of these old Kurt Angle, Chris Benoit stuff, right? Like these guys were excellent in the ring. They were just amazing performers, and even though it was a tragedy, some good has come of it, right? They now protect their guys. Yep. They make sure the guys aren't overdoing with drugs. They're not killing themselves. They're not blowing up their hearts. They're not dying. They're not gonna kill. Like, I don't know.
This also like had ripple effects in other sports.
Yeah,
like other people who like the NFL essentially had to start taking concussion seriously.
Yeah, certainly, and drug use came down, and that's what I mentioned. Chris Nowitzki, if you don't know, he does a lot of work with CTE and brain development, and he's done a lot with football, right, and pushed that element and kind of pushed that agenda and helped make football a safer sport.
Yeah, and hockey and anything with head issues, and same thing even in soccer.
Yeah,
like like football, that like European football, like they changed the kickoff rule in football. They no more heading the ball in youth soccer. Like the world essentially changed because of Chris Benoit. And like, yes, absolute horrible thing that happened, but at the same time, like there is some good that came out of it, and like you can't erase the past. Mm-hmm. And I don't know. I think wrestling's kind of like an art form, and they're like the Kurt Angle, Chris Benoit matches. Like this was art. This was like peak. Like because it was fascinating. It was interesting. There was this back and forth battle. Like they were throwing off throwing each other like so many like supers or the super moves and all that special moves back and forth, and they were constantly like, and it was just like it was interesting to see. Like it was just like this beautiful choreography. So
yeah, cool, sweet. So that concludes those two matches. Fun stuff. Cool.
Yeah, these two cards.
So good times. Culmination of some good work. Lots of good work. Interesting. There's a lot of people too, if you're interested and you're like, I kind of like wrestling. It's been a while. Brian Zane, I think it's like Wrestling with Regret. He does tons of good old wrestling pay-per-view reviews and retrospectives. So if you're into any of those things, I recommend checking some of those guys out. Lots of good guys on YouTube's making tons of good wrestling content. So if you have those fixes, check it out. For us, though, we're going to move on to our cultural significance section, and we're going to get out of here for today. So in this section, we look at game design, the lore, inspiration, turning points, interesting stories. We talk about how this game relates, give other examples, tie it all back together in the end. This game doesn't need to be revisited for too long to understand what major influences on the video game industry was providing a good pivot point for wrestling games from the 2D world into the 3D world. Yeah, okay. All right, cool. You could see how realistic they could be, how intricate the story modes could be. And in future titles, we would see storylines where wrestlers could go through. We had voice acting, right? So if you went through, you could see like Chris Jericho had a bunch of recorded lines, and it was a little more entertaining, right? It all kind of comes from essentially these experiences, right? These where they started. They tried, but obviously it was all text-based. It was through sounds. They couldn't have the voice acting. It was just kind of too old of a system. So then I was kind of like, I don't know what to talk about today. These aren't the most crucial games. I don't think we have to talk about this big like 2D to 3D world. I was like, why don't we just do some weird stuff? And because I'm trying new stuff, we're going to make Tyson play a little game here in a section which might become a permanent feature if it's well responded to. But I think we're going to start out by looking at... I liked wrestling. We both liked wrestling at some point. Are we ever going to talk about wrestling games again?
Maybe not.
Yeah, maybe not.
I don't know.
Yeah, so I was kind of like, well, why don't we make this a little bit more of a definitive wrestling experience? And what's more definitive than talking about... Now, you didn't know about this, so you have to kind of be on the fly. I'll go first, obviously, give you some time to think about it. Or you could just agree with me. Maybe we'll talk it through. What would be your WWE Mount Rushmore? So we're talking the top 4 wrestlers that should be included on like the we're making a mountain. We're going to put guys' faces on a mountain. Which 4 wrestlers do you believe are like the most influential over the last, let's go back to the 80s. So you can kind of include anyone from the 80s onwards. So who would be your Mount Rushmore?
For me, The Rock.
Okay.
Right?
Yep.
He's on
I would
there.
agree. Yep. No, he's on there. Yep.
I'm debating between like Undertaker, and I want Undertaker on there because he has like this long storied history.
Sure.
Like his like run of never losing at WrestleMania was like epic, and he's just a unique character and went through like he's been around for forever. So for me, it's like kind of want to include the Undertaker.
Okay.
I'm thinking The other two are a little bit harder because I don't like. Part of me wants to be like, well, Hulk Hogan, but it's like I also didn't really grow up with Hulk Hogan, so I'm leaning more Stone Cold. I'm like,
Okay. Yep.
shorter career, but very impactful. Like I'm on Austin 316 was like T-shirts all over in the 90s, so maybe him. And then I was like, maybe I should have someone more modern, like John Cena. Like as much as I wasn't a huge John Cena guy, I feel like he was kind of the guy to hold the torch.
He did take it over,
so maybe
kind of after them for sure.
Like it's like maybe that's it. Like The Rock, Stone Cold, Undertaker, John Cena.
Okay, cool. So I'm gonna go. Yeah, I agree. I think Stone Cold. I think The Rock, and part of my Mount Rushmore decision, and kind of just in my mind, the way I make it make sense is it has to be how popular was wrestling when that person was the most popular wrestler, right? So what kind of cultural impact did they have? The Attitude Era, fueled by Stone Cold Steve Austin, fueled by The Rock, was one of the hottest times, was one of the biggest times in the industry. It was a cultural mover. Every guy walking down the street, every white person you'd see who would have a Stone Cold Steve Austin t-shirt. Every kid had a Stone Cold Steve Austin t-shirt. They made appearances on Saturday Night Live. The Rock fought Mankind during football events. Like there was a halftime event where they had a hardcore match, right? They just kind of became super popular, household names, and during that popularity, I think that's why you have to include The Rock and Stone Cold, the face of the company, during arguably its most popular time in the last 30 years, 40 years, was fueled by these two guys. So yeah, you can't have a Mount Rushmore with those two characters. I love your inclusion of The Undertaker. I don't know if I would put Undertaker on it just yet in my third spot, because I'm more of a Hulk Hogan person. Wrestling was stupid. Wrestling was dumb. Wrestling was something you do in the sideshow. You go to the Stampede and, oh, you want to watch Stampede wrestling later? It's kind of stupid and it's dumb and it's fake, right? Oh, they sometimes have little people come out and fight the big guy. Ha ha ha. But Hulk Hogan made it cool, made it mainstream, made it popular, right? He was the kind of that unifying force, and it kind of helped make it a bit more mainstream, right? So his emergence in the 80s and just popularity through basically what became WrestleMania, right? Why are we talking about WrestleMania 17? Well, it's because Hulk Hogan was there with Vince McMahon, right? During the early events. If you go back and watch like the Mr. McMahon documentary on Netflix, which is actually pretty good. And if you haven't watched it, you'd probably go back and watch it and be like, yeah, okay, that was a pretty good, like, I watched it, I sat down and it was like 5 hours later and it was over. And I was like, fuck yeah, that was great. Hulk Hogan is synonymous with just the emergence, the popularity, and the success of wrestling, right? It probably would have been a failed industry if not for his inclusion. And one of my favorites, I think it was like WrestleMania 9, was the storyline from the Royal Rumble. I'm going to go on a diatribe. Sorry, I know this has kind of nothing to do with anything. But essentially, Yokozuna, this big Japanese wrecking ball, won the Royal Rumble, was going after Bret Hart for his WWE title, but Bret Hart's like, no, it can't be Japan. Japan can never defeat me and be powerful and great. So what happens at WrestleMania? Oh, Yokozuna, you better believe, main event, defeats Bret Hart, wins the championship. Japan is now the greatest nation in the world. Until, wait, Hulk Hogan, for no reason, comes out in 2 seconds, leg drops, Yokozuna wins the title, and is left celebrating at the end. Why? Because he's Hulk Hogan, that's why. That's the end of that story. So I think just his impact, his push, right? What made WCW as popular as it was the inclusion of the NWO, it was inclusion of the Hulk Hogan. You get to include all that with Hulk Hogan, and that's why I do think Hulk Hogan has to be on my Mount Rushmore, because he kind of helped the Attitude Era get to where it was, right? Him being on Turner WCW with the NWO, making that cool, being Hollywood Hulk Hogan.
Well, he essentially like boosted to wrestling. Like he helped WWF and then went over to WCW and like, no, I'm gonna like lift this up again.
That's what I mean. Like he was the defining force with Vince McMahon through the 90s and that popularity rise. So that's why I think he has to be included. And now I'm open. I'm like, you're right. I don't think I maybe would look at John Cena and he'd be an entry for sure. And I like that you went there, but I would have to say ultimately him being Super Cena, never really creating any additional talent, never having a cool storyline. Like, what was the best storyline that John Cena was ever involved in? Tell me a cool story.
Couldn't tell you.
Yeah,
Couldn't tell
no
you.
one knows, right? Like, no one cares. It's dumb. He never did anything super influential. Basically, they're like, well, kids like you and they buy your shirt, so we'll just keep making you win because kids make money. He was just capitalism, right? I don't think John Cena was that successful, to be honest with you, and I would not include him. In which case, I might put The Undertaker as my 4th entry onto my Mount Rushmore. I like that. Okay. I like that inclusion because you're right. His streak, his WrestleMania streak, when he lost to Brock Lesnar, that might go down as one of the most shocking, influential moments in wrestling. You didn't know, if you didn't know wrestling at the time, you may not watched, you probably knew that Brock Lesnar defeated The Undertaker. You probably heard about it. It was probably discussed in pop culture. It was mentioned on SportsCenter, right? It was a big moment. The black guy whose like face is like dropped open became super memeable. So I think maybe for that inclusion, I might include The Undertaker for just the prestigious career that essentially he put together, right? And he kind of is synonymous, right? Hulk Hogan, Undertaker, almost everyone knows those kind of names. So I think that would probably be my Mount Rushmore. Do you have a argument for your last spot?
No. I think, I just kind of just gut instinct. I also, like, I don't know, there's for some reason being a Canadian, you're just like, I kind of want to put Bret Hart on there somewhere.
Yeah, it's a tough one.
Because, like, great storyline. He got screwed over, like, basically, and then just, like, went away to obscurity, but for all intents and purposes, a super nice guy. Yeah. Whenever I've heard anything about him. Well,
he was the next guy after Hulk Hogan. Hulk Hogan left. Bret Hart got the title, right? So yeah, like he was kind of the in between, right, between kind of the Austin and the Hulk Hogan. So that is definitely important. The other guy I would include, and just based on his success in the ring, and now the fact that he's running the WWE.
Oh yeah,
the inclusion of Triple H. I fucking hated Triple H. Triple H, like, almost made me... I loved wrestling. I almost stopped because he was just so dominant, right? And just the fact that he continued to be dominant. He was the main foil for the Vinces and the Austin, The Rock, even the new guys, right? Like the Roman Reigns, the Brock Lesnars. They've all kind of had that confrontation. Now he's running the show. So is there room potentially to knock Undertaker off for Triple H? Maybe? But I think in terms of icon status, I think The Undertaker is a bit more of an iconic character, but I think pound for pound, like Triple H is the most successful wrestler ever. I mean, he now runs $1 billion business, so good for him.
Yep. And I mean, that whole story where, like, what he, like, drugs Stephanie and marry her or something? Yep. It's like... What a crazy time.
Like, if you want a good laugh, like, you and Dad should sit down and watch the Mr. McMahon documentary, and you'll be like, oh my God, this is awesome. Because it is funny. Like, there was one part where, in real life, Stephanie was pregnant, and she was going to be written off TV, but, like, Vince was like, hold on. What if it turns out that Mr. McMahon is the father? And, like, Stephanie was like, absolutely not. You're a fucking horrible person. I hate you. And he's like, but, like, it would make good TV, Steph. And like, you're like, what a lunatic, In fact, maybe that's the correct answer. Maybe Mr. McMahon, Vince McMahon.
Maybe it's Mr. McMahon.
Maybe he should have been on the Mount Rushmore. Maybe he was actually the correct answer all along, right? But
yeah, 100%. You don't think of him, but it's like I still remember like he comes busting in this, like he was all roided up too. Oh, yeah. And then he runs into the ring the one time and blows both his ACLs and is yelling while just it's like the sitting on the ground.
Did John Cena win? Did Batista win the Royal Rumble? It's a Royal Rumble, and he comes in and like he smacks his legs and he's sitting there and he's just like in like excruciating pain, and then has to be like dragged to the back. But he like never broke character, and no, it's pretty good. So cool. So Mount Rushmore, it's tough. I think I include my 3, and then that other guy, Undertaker, Mr. McMahon, Triple H. I think it would probably change day by day.
Yeah, I think so too.
Cool. Sweet. And so with that kind of wraps up our show. The only thing, I have one other thing, and like I said, we're trying different stuff. I heard this on a different podcast, and I was like, well, this is a fun idea. Instead of maybe we're actually going to break a rule. I don't know if you're all aware of this, guys, but we have a time machine on this show. And one of the rules was we were allowed, so when we started, we took a very big responsibility. We signed a contract allowing us access to our time machine, our patented Wayback Machine, right? We can travel into any time and we can look at it. That's the idea. We're supposed to look, maybe live there, maybe have a birthday. I'm not really sure. That's it. Today, we're going to change a crucial rule. We're going to allow Tyson to travel back in time and redo the Oscars from these years? What? So, instead of maybe it's been 10 years. Does our Wayback Machine change? Maybe. Let's find out. So, what if we did an Oscar redo? So instead of just telling you what movies came out, we actually look at the award shows from that year and let Tyson decide. So let's look at the Best Picture Oscars for 2000 and 2001 and see if Tyson will break the crucial rule of time travel and alter the past. So in 2000, Best Pictures. The category included American Beauty, The Cider House Rules, Green Mile, The Insider, and The Sixth Sense, with American Beauty ultimately winning. So, Tyson, if you had the power, the opportunity, a time machine, would you travel back and change the past?
I like American Beauty. I think it's a really good movie. But damn it, I love The Green Mile. That movie will break you. It's so good. And I really think that I think I would redo it.
Okay.
I think I would do it. I would give it to The Green Mile. It's fantastic. It's one of those movies that you watch once and it just kind of stays with you. Whereas American Beauty, I know the story, but it doesn't really stick with me. Whereas there's vivid scenes in The Green Mile where you're like, man, what a devastating movie.
Yeah,
just absolutely crushing.
Yeah, I could say I've been a little bit more emotionally involved. Although, I'm always curious, what was going on with that bag? Never tells you. I watch American Beauty all the time, and I'm like, what the fuck's happening? What's going on? Who is that bag? Okay, cool. So congratulations, potentially The Green Mile. Now, in 2000, see, this is kind of a fun, different category, right? Huh?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. No, I like it.
Okay, cool. Sweet. We can pick different years. One year you can pick director, best actors. We can talk about them. Cool. Maybe I can make whole lists. Look at that. Adding spice in our life after all this time.
Yeah, after 10 years of podcasting.
2001. Let's look at that one quick and then we'll get out of here because we've been talking for a long. I'm looking at the clock and I'm like, why is it so many hours? I was like, oh, we've talked for an hour and a half. I thought this would be a 40-minute show. Good job, us. 2000. So the winner was, the winner, Best Picture, we saw Gladiator. We also see Traffic, Aaron Brockovich, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, and Chocolat, all being nominated with Gladiator ultimately winning. So did they make the right decision, or are you going to break the law of time travel and alter the past again?
Well, I love Gladiator.
Yeah.
I think it's a fantastic movie. Are you not entertained? It's great.
Mm-hmm.
Traffic's good though. Aaron Brockovich is solid. Crouching Tiger's would be the one that I would put against Gladiator, but I just can't knock it. Gladiator, Crouching Tiger just doesn't do enough for me. I think they got it right. I think Gladiator still wins this one. Although Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, I think was probably more cinematically important.
In a world of more wokeness, equality-ish, I could see it definitely having a chance. Nowadays, if it was to happen, right, in the world where a Parasite wins the Best Picture, yeah, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, sure. It was a foreign film. It was not accessible to people, but also Russell Crowe, this movie's Gladiator's fucking incredible. It's a great film, start to finish. It is one of the best movies ever. Watching it now, sitting down, you're like, wow, that was awesome. That was great. I love it. So yeah, I think it stands up. It's amazing. It's great. You are entertained after watching it, and it deserves to be credited. Plus, I'm pretty sure it started every white man's obsession with thinking about the Roman Empire. So it's pretty cool.
Yes.
So it definitely contributed to it.
Definitely. Yeah. And even Joaquin Phoenix,
yeah.
I mean, he's great in this movie where he's just hamming it up a lot of the time, and he's just is such a slime ball, and just you hate him. You just absolutely hate him. But it's man, not very often do you get two legendary actors kind of just actually get to go head to head on a lot of these things. And and it's one of those movies where the hero doesn't win. He dies, and but he avenges his family, and you're just yeah, hell yeah, Russell Crowe, so good.
Yeah, it's pretty badass. Sweet, cool. So with that wraps up that section. New segments. Maybe we'll start doing that a little bit more in the future going forward. Unless I've already made the notes, then I may not edit it, so it may not happen next month, but maybe going forward from there. And I think with that, we're done. Did we miss anything?
No, man. We you added a bunch of cool stuff, and I like the Mount Rushmore. I like the Oscar games. I like talking about these games that we would have have probably talked about.
Yeah.
And I think it's like wrestling's a big part of was a big part of our lives. Kind of still is a part of our lives, but it's like it's fun to talk about. I think that especially with like the road to WrestleMania kind of being like right there, it's like
I guess,
tis the season.
and in terms of like theme songs that I sing the most, Rushmore, yeah, John Cena's definitely making it, because the time I walk around going do 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 do, it is like most of the time when I'm walking around my house, I'm singing that song. So
yeah,
and like when anytime I walk into a room, I'm always like, should I just bust out John Cena as I come in here and give him like a big alpha dog and throw my spinner belts? Because I think about it sometimes. Think about it. So.
Who doesn't have their spinner belt always handy, just in case they need to?
Just in case. Hustle, loyalty, respect. All right, cool. So with that, we will get out of here with our hustle, loyalty, respect, and be back in a couple weeks. What are we talking about? Comic books? Comic books. Cool.
Comic books, I think.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Cool. So see you guys then. And then we're playing a game in a month, but I think it's Metroid Prime. Cool.
Yes.
Sweet.
Should be a good time. Mick's already kind of hinted that maybe his game of the year already, so tune in.
Yeah,
Tune in.
It was great. I loved it. Awesome. So we'll be back in a month talking about that. Until then, bye.
See you.